Hello again. We're going to, again, for the next couple of lectures, we're going to discuss the different types of important biological macromolecules that are the main building blocks and workhorses of cells. And again, so this is just going to be kind of a hit the highlights review because I'm assuming that you've had this in a previous course. If you have not, then you probably do need to go through and cover some of the basic chemistry information in that optional module inside the Chapter 1 area on Blackboard. All right, carbohydrates and lipids. There we go. Carbohydrates. All right, so what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are generally, so on the last video lecture, we recalled that the basic building blocks of carbohydrates are molecules called monosaccharides, which we also know those as sugars. And when you guys see diagrams like this, like here it looks like a stop sign, that's an organic chemistry type of structural drawing. And a lot of times for simplicity's sake, if you ever have to take an organic chemistry class, you'll see this in more detail, or a biochemistry class, where you've got the points on the little stop sign figure there. There are carbon atoms there, and they're just left out to make the diagram a little bit simpler because there are so many carbon atoms that exist in organic types of molecules. And also where you got those little sticks there, like right there and right there, there are hydrogens that are understood to be bonded to the carbon. So those sticks there are representing a covalent type of bond between the carbons at the points of the little stop sign diagram and hydrogen atoms that are bonded to those carbons. Okay, so again, monosaccharides are also known as sugars, and then monosaccharides can be bonded together in chains and patterns to create what we call polysaccharides. And polysaccharides are types of carbohydrates, and polysaccharides can be attached to each other in various patterns to make more complex types of carbohydrates. Another term to be familiar with, disaccharide. If you have two monosaccharides bonded together, you can see here they're bonded together with an oxygen atom between them. That's called a disaccharide. What's an example of a disaccharide? Sucrose is a disaccharide. Sucrose is a glucose monosaccharide that is bonded to a fructose monosaccharide. You've probably heard of both of those types of sugars before. Polysaccharides can involve chaining together lots and lots and lots of sugar, sometimes in complex branching patterns. And they've got a beetle over here because they're showing you the exoskeleton, the outside shell-like covering of an insect, is built from a complex type of polysaccharide. So what are some basic functions? What do you think about with carbohydrates? Probably the key one you're used to thinking about is energy. So quick sources of energy. Carbohydrates are used by many living things as the preferred energy source. So you break apart these molecules, there's energy stored in their bonds, and you harness that energy to use for the work that a cell needs to do to survive. But carbohydrates can perform other functions as well, like they're showing you here. There are some very tough types, shell-like types of carbohydrates that can be used for coverings on some organisms for protection. We'll see that some bacteria use carbohydrates, and other living things as well use carbohydrates to absorb water and help them stay hydrated. Probably the key thing you want to think with carbohydrates is quick sources of energy. All right, now how about your lipids? The key thing to remember about lipids is they are hydrophobic. Hopefully you've heard that term before. If you have not, hydro refers to water. Phobic means a fear of something, like you have a phobia. So lipids are hydrophobic types of molecules. They don't like water. And a good example of a lipid is any type of oil you're familiar with. And you guys know oils and waters don't mix. So among your 4 major types of biological macromolecules, and again, those are your carbohydrates, your lipids, your proteins, and your nucleic acids, the lipids are the only ones that are hydrophobic, and that gives them special jobs and properties inside living things. All right, now there are different types of lipids, but a lot of lipids fall into this category, triglycerides. And triglycerides are built from, just like you got carbohydrates are built from monosaccharides. Monosaccharides are the smaller building blocks of those. Lipids are built from a molecule called glycerol. They're in pink. And these guys down here are examples of fatty acids. So triglycerides are a key type of lipid, and they're built from glycerol. That's one smaller component. And then 3 fatty acids are attached to the glycerol molecule. And you guys have heard of fatty acids before. We hear about saturated fatty acids, unsaturated, monounsaturated, and so forth and so on. And that's what they're showing you some examples of here in this figure from your textbook. Fatty acids have long chains of carbons and hydrogens. So they're hydrocarbons. And whenever you have lots of carbons and lots of hydrogens without other types of atoms in there, that's going to be a hydrophobic type of molecule. Those molecules love each other, but they don't interact well with water. They don't like water. They're hydrophobic. And what does saturated versus unsaturated mean? If you notice, all of the carbons in that chain have single bonds to hydrogens. If you notice over here, we have an unsaturated fatty acid, and some of the carbon-carbon bonds in there are double bonds. And a double bond means that those carbons are sharing 2 pairs of electrons with each other. And again, if that's getting out there for you, don't worry about it too much, or you might want to check out, there's some information about bonding and so forth on the optional chemistry module. And notice how the unsaturated fatty acid there on the right has like a kink in it. So the shapes of those fatty acids are different, and that gives them special properties that can be important for various functions in our cells. Back up over here again before we move on. All right, some other basic functions for lipids. So we said that they were hydrophobic. Didn't realize I didn't have another slide over there. Do your reading in your textbook to make sure that you're caught up. I'm just going to hit some highlights here with the videos, but do your reading in your textbook to make sure you've read through all of the key points in there about carbohydrates and lipids and so forth. Basic functions, we have lipids in our cell membranes. You guys remember special types of lipids called phospholipids. Hopefully you've heard of those before. If not, you'll hear about those when we move on to reviewing cell membranes in Chapter 3. Again, they're hydrophobic. Energy storage. You guys know that lipids are also sources of energy for us. If you break apart, there's lots of energy stored in all those carbon-hydrogen bonds, and if you break those bonds, you can release that energy and use that to do things that cells need to do that require fuel. So energy storage is very important, but think with lipids, think more like long-term energy storage. Most living things prefer to break down carbohydrates. They can break those down quickly, and lipids are usually or often are a second choice. And you guys know as humans, we store lipids for long-term energy, and microorganisms in some cases do that as well. There are lipids that function as hormones in the human body. So if you haven't taken your Biology 202 class yet, you'll learn about that when you get to that particular course. All right, so that's going to bring us to our next video clip. Will be about proteins and nucleic acids.